Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Welcome back to another session of our quick Q&A Tuesday. Today's question actually came from Amari and on our Discord channel. And Amari had a longer question, but we kind of broke it down because it's a really big topic to kind of tackle, especially when we're talking about disability and inclusion in our particular field. So I think first thing I would definitely like to do is talk about the current question that Amari had, and that question was, when applying for jobs, especially doing interviews, should I address my disabilities, autism, learning disabilities, or also like physical disabilities as well? And the second part of the question is, how do I deal with stress in the workplace, whether it's remotely or in an office as well too, as a person with disabilities? So let's answer that question. If you guys are having any issues of viewing this, as usual, please let me know. But this is definitely a topic that we will be tackling more than once. So let's see. Let's first talk about disability in animation. So we actually have quite a lot of people who are actually drawn to animation and art as an expression of as a way of expressing themselves as well too. So in ASIFA, our organization ourselves, we have a lot of different people from on different spectrums with different learning disabilities. We also have people who have different physical disabilities. A lot of things that seem to crop up quite a bit in artists is having back issues, carpal tunnels, hand issues, and also just in general a lot of different assortments. For me myself, I have ADHD, so I kind of have a hard time focusing my attention on things as well too. So coming to the first question, when applying for a job and doing interviews, how should I address my disabilities? So this can go many different ways, but the first thing I would like to talk about is your rights. So before you kind of talk about going into a workplace, just in general, I think most people are probably more familiar with the American Disability Act already, or if not, you can check out ada.gov for the information about this. But when you are in a workplace of some sorts, there has to usually be reasonable accommodations under the guideline that has to be made for people with disabilities as well too. Sometimes they can request different documentations from you to accommodate you, but in your interviews you are not it's not mandatory that you have to disclose your disabilities if you're not comfortable with it. And if you don't think that it's not something that affects your job, you do not have to mention it as well too. However, if you think about it being something that you want to bring up during a topic of interview, I think the first thing you want to do is gauge the atmosphere that you're in during the interview. When you're doing the interview itself, are you feeling comfortable with the people you're talking to? I think that would be the first thing you would want to think about. For example, if you're having a interview with the studio and the studio is talking about, oh, we have these types of works that are coming up, you could always ask them how their work hours are like, and if they already have any types of accommodation for people for inclusion and disabilities. So that's number one. Number one, you can already ask them to see if there is any type of formal thing or like an informal thing that they have in place for that as well too. That's a good way to kind of gauge the atmosphere, because even though we know that the law says one thing, there's always this sense of feeling that, oh, am I going to lose out on a job opportunity because I have these disadvantages? So I'm going to say that this, but my former boss, who was working in design, at an art design agency, and we have a lot of really high-profile clients as well too. Yeah, he was on the spectrum. He was colorblind, and he also had carpal tunnel, but he is still able to work in the field as well too. So a lot of people who are working in the field, they have like different ways of dealing with their own disabilities, such as I have friends who have issues with colors, so they might use a made template of colors that they choose from, or ask for a second opinion, or work in a particular department that doesn't require you to have to be color focused as well too. So that's the first one, is when you're applying for an interview, how do you address your disabilities, is you want to gauge the atmosphere. You want to ask them if they already have anything in place for people of like, if you feel like, oh, I have a disability that might hinder me from standing for a long time. You can ask them about, oh, what are your breaks like for artists? So that way you can already gauge if they have something in place, and sometimes they might even bring it up themselves as well too. So I would say that an interview is kind of like a meeting face to face, where it's like, you're on a first date type of thing. So you don't always necessarily have to tell people everything. If you feel that it in some way can hinder your ability to work, then you could always bring it up subtly after you gauge the atmosphere and see how it's like, for sure. The second part of this would be, how do I deal with stress in workplace, remote or office, as a person with disability? So this comes into if they've already hired you, and then you're working supposedly remotely, and you have things like you're deaf. You can always request to see if they have like text and telephone in. If you prefer certain methods, you can also voice it out as well too. Because when it comes to reasonable accommodation, sometimes you also have to self-advocate for yourself in voicing out what you need. Otherwise, it's something that somebody might not know about. For example, if you're in a studio and you have back issues, you can ask HR if you can have a specialized chair. It's okay to do that, or if there's a way that they can accommodate that as well. Sometimes they might ask you for, doctor's letter or so forth. But it is like, if it is a reasonable accommodation, you should be able to discuss that. Whether it's if you need things like a sign language interpreter, if you need to work in a reduced noise environment, if you need to work, maybe request some remote time just to deal with what you have, or go to appointments. Those are things that if they should be made as reasonable accommodation for you. So that shouldn't be something that a lot of places, like they might say, oh, we'll think about it, we'll talk about it. But if you're in America, that is by law, that is something that you can request. The second part of this would be, if you are working, how do you request for something? I know a lot of people are kind of scared, because I had a couple of people who did talk to me about this before, as, oh, what if they don't want to do it, and like, I'm so scared to ask for this. Check around in your office to see if there's more than one person who actually needs accommodation. There is this thing, power in numbers, and I'm not saying to go in and say, hey, we all demand this type of thing, but if you feel that other people might have certain needs that you do as well too, you can always see if there's a way to form a small community to talk about what you have, because I think discussion is important in terms of enlightenment, because even at ASIFA we learn about a lot of different types of disabilities from our members. Everybody has something unique. Just because you have one type of disability doesn't mean that it's dealt with the same way with how other people deal with it as well too. Some people, like for me, for example, if I have ADHD, one thing that I definitely do is I try to schedule things a little bit more tightly than usual. I'll have like a note that's opened, or a Kanban board where I can go in and look what I need to do, what is done, and what I need to do next. And that's a way for me to kind of work on that. But I will also sometimes preface it to my team and let them know if I need some type of accommodation, or let them know that, hey, I might get distracted. Would you help me remind me about like what I need to get done, or can you give me a list of what the priority stuff, things that you need are? That way I can make sure I get these done before the things that need to be done by today. So I think one of the things that you can also ask to is if you're hired and you need to go into a studio, is to ask them if you can drop by the studio beforehand to kind of check out the atmosphere, check out what kind of resources are available. For example, if you have something that prohibits you from, eating a lot of different things, like you have gluten-free, you need to have there are certain things you can't eat or you're allergic to, then you might want to find out if there are any restaurants in the area that accommodates that, or if you want to bring your own lunch or dinner, depending. Same thing as making sure you read through the handbooks to kind of see what kind of policies they have in place or what policies they don't have in place. So that way you can always bring it up and ask if they can either make accommodations or what their policies are on different things. Usually, probably, you can also talk to HR about certain things that you need. So in dealing with stress in workplace, and this is dependent on what type of person you are and who you are as well too. There are things that you can do, and there are things that you might need to ask the office or the workspace to do for you. In terms of the things that, like I said, this is all personal as well too, because everybody has different things. Like for example, for us with ASIFA, we try to make sure that we have closed captions where we can. For people who might be a little bit more hard of hearing, and we try to see if we have our pronouns in our emails, so that like we can see who wants to be addressed as what their preferred pronoun is. Also, if you have problem processing things in meetings where it's all real time, you can also ask if there can be accommodations with, can we have written notes, or like if you can request for certain technology to be added so that it's easier for you to process whatever you need to do your job well. The second part is definitely communication with the people around you to educate them on your needs, because for one thing, even though it would be ideal for people to educate themselves about different types of things and that help other people, we know that in the real world, that's a little bit harder for everybody to kind of get into. But also because you are unique, your needs are not the same as other people's needs as well, even if you have the same disability. So therefore, education is also a way that could be important by sharing telling people, hey, I have these types of back issues. So therefore, the best way to do this is these types of exercise, and see if people are interested in getting in a group to learn more about it as well too. The other thing that I also do is that I would also try to see what usually helps me with my productivity and how I de-stress. And that might be a different thing. For example, if you have trouble focusing in a loud environment, that's definitely something you should ask the office if they have a way to place you in somewhere that's less loud. Or also, then you can ask, also see if there's a way that you can use headphones and let people know for sure that, hey, I'm using my headphones. It doesn't mean that I'm ignoring you, but I have better time concentrating. You can even tell them that, hey, I have a schedule. If you want to chat and take a break, these are my schedules, and this is how I de-stress for myself. So don't take it personal. Everybody has their own way, and I think that also extends to not just people with disabilities, but just in general. Everybody has different working styles. So the more you're able to communicate that working style with other people, the better it is. The other thing you can also do is see what kind of process and protocols are not available, especially when working remotely. Because when you're working remotely, it's a lot harder for some people to read body cues, social cues. Are they mad at me? When you read the text, when you read the emails, you're like, oh no. Then sometimes you can also request and ask them, hey, is there a way I can schedule a time to talk with you, maybe on Zoom meeting instead of through emails, to go over this and that? If you're finding that their responsive style is a little bit faster, like sometimes with me, I tend to go many miles an hour. So therefore, my thoughts tend to scatter and be all over the place sometimes. So in that particular case, when I'm responding to another team member, they might have trouble keeping up. So in that case, it would be like, hey, Ginger, do you mind making a summary note of that, of what we've talked about? And then like we can discuss this or something like that. Because that way, people won't have to kind of see, like I'm on this topic now and I'm on that topic now. And it's also really good to voice it out as well too if you're having a little bit of issue kind of keeping up with different people's different styles. The other one you can also tell people is your working style, and let them know how it's best for them to do that. You can also point them to different resources that are available, like advocacy, like the autism advocacy organizations, to let them learn a little bit more about the different type of disabilities that you have. But most of all, I also understand one thing is that I've talked to a parent of a teenager in particular who came to one of our panels, and he did mention that like his son was really into filmmaking, but in the filmmaking class, the teacher just outrightly kind of told him that we don't accommodate for your kid, where like they did really want to accommodate for that as well. So like I said, these are things that if you need to escalate them, you need to escalate them. That's just the way it is. But in order, I feel like these are some of the challenges, like emotionally, that a lot of people who have disabilities may face. And it's the same reason why you feel like as a certain minority group, you might not want to voice certain things that you have already that puts you at a disadvantage. But that's also where it comes in that I keep mentioning, that build a community around that. Talk to people who actually are responsive and supportive of you, especially in that work environment that you have. Talk to the people who you can trust. Sometimes, like if I need a second opinion, I will also try to get a second opinion of what the different things as well too, before I broach it to a bigger room and say, hey, this is what I think. This is a good way for me to say this as well. So I think that's one of the things. And before I leave, I wanted to also point you guys to a really nice comic for mental health and anxiety from one of my friends, Sage Coffee. She, I forgot to ask them for the pronoun, but I will say they first. They are a comic artist, and they do comics about mental health and anxiety, and particularly on the Lily. And so I would definitely, I'll paste this down below in the comments section. But it's really nice to read about these different personal experiences of people working. And so I would suggest that, if there is, honestly, when people are asking about resources, I feel that there are not enough resources to go around that specialize, especially in animation, for specific types of things like anxiety in animation, or dealing with working on the spectrum in animation as well too. So I think these are definitely things that we will want to increase in resources for people and try to get out there a little bit more. And the other one that Sage also did was also about panic disorder. Panic disorder while Sage was working, then like the different comments that Sage got, and also like different tips of like how Sage was like trying to deal with it. So it's like about communication, reminding people that they can make it through, like giving people resources of how to also help you is definitely one of the good things that's there as well too. So I think that's it for our quick Q&A Tuesday today, but this is not a topic that it's just a one-off topic for sure. We plan to do a bigger discussion in our Discord channel and address this more along as we go, maybe make this into a panel with more people who have different types of disabilities and how they deal with different things, because it's not a one-size-fit-all. I can only talk about my personal experience and the people that I talk with as well. But in all, I think it's all really about empathy and learning about other people's working style, learning about your own working style, as well as how to communicate that properly into a sustainable relationship, whether it's in your life or in your work relationship as well too. So once we have our Discord channel up, probably on our like sketch meet Wednesday, I'll let you know about that. And if you have any other quick questions for us to tackle on Quick Questions Q&A Tuesday, just let me know and I will tackle that. Yeah, thanks guys.